So that's all background. This is now coming closer to the research that we're actually involved in. The Minnesota Department of Natural Resources is interested in studying sulfates in the St. Louis River watershed. So everyone knows what a watershed is. It's sort of the area of land that drains to a specific outlet point. And so this is all the area of land that drains to the St. Louis River and then eventually out into the estuary here in Duluth and Lake Superior. So the question that the DNR is trying to answer is, does sulfate released as a result of mining operations up here on the Iron Range influence mercury-related processes in the watershed? So this is sort of an overlay of all the different sub-watersheds within the large watershed, and these ones that are a little bit lighter colored here are the ones that actually contain some mining influence. So what we're trying to answer is, does this sulfate come out of here and create more methylmercury downstream from that? The study actually showed, so this graph is a little confusing to look at first. There's a lot of things on there, but just look at the lines first. This 180, this means 180 miles upstream from the estuary. So at 180 miles upstream from the estuary, which is right up here, there's not very much sulfate there yet. But as we go downstream and pass through these areas where each of these rivers, as a result of mining operations, is contributing some sulfate to the main stem of the St. Louis River estuary. So there is some increase in sulfates along here, but then by the time we get down into this other area, all these other watersheds are sort of diluting that sulfate that was added up here. So by the time we get down to the estuary, we're back down into the 10 to 25 milligram per liter, or similar to actually what was present even before the mining influence happened. So yeah, go ahead.
Good question. So the mining, there is sulfite mining, right? Where they're using sulfur gas or whatever. Is that right?
So traditionally,
I'm not aware of sulfite type mining, acid mining here. But how is this coming out of the iron mines?
Yes. So there are, and I'm not a geologist, but I am aware of a little bit of the history of mining. So predominantly it has been, you're right, ferrous mining or iron mining up here. There's recently been some proposals to start precious metals mining, or copper sulfide, nickel sulfide mining on the Iron Range. And although that hasn't started yet, the reason there's proposals for it is because it's there. There is some copper and sulfide that's there. And so formerly, as mining companies were digging down to get to the iron, they accidentally dug through some areas that had some sulfur in them. And as a result of digging that out, it's sort of introduced it to the surface where it can be oxidized and mobilized by other areas. So there is already some sulfide that has been released, but the chances of that are greater in the presence of this new kind of mining, copper nickel sulfide mining. So there's a lot of talk about sulfate right now in sort of the legislature and laws and all over the state about sulfide, and part of that is because of the proposals to start this copper nickel sulfide mine. But they already have sort of dug through those layers as they were trying to get to the iron before. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And feel free to stop me and ask questions as we're going along. I'm happy to talk about it. So the takeaway point here is that the kind of the mining influenced watersheds are adding sulfate, but it's more or less diluted by the time it gets down to the estuary down here. And that's the reason I'm talking about the estuary a lot is that's where our research has been focused on, is down in the estuary. So the conceptual model for our specific research project, which Brian's going to talk about more, involves trying to understand what will happen if we perturbate a natural system, or if we introduce something new. So if this is the natural system and this is the location of the microbial community, so there's oxygen bacteria on top, iron bacteria, and then sulfate bacteria at some level down here. These are the ones that produce methylmercury. If we maybe increase sulfates up here as a result of mining operations, how is that going to change both the location and the extent of these bacterial communities? Will it move sulfate reduction up, or will it move down? Will there be a lot more? Will there be a lot less? How will that change in the natural system due to anthropogenic or human influences change the location where sulfate reduction is happening And consequently, what impact will that have on mercury methylation? So sulfate-reducing bacteria need two things to survive. They need sulfates, which is present at low levels everywhere, but can be elevated due to human influences, such as acid rain or mining, as we were talking about, or other industries, or even just urban activity can increase sulfate. And they also need organic matter. So they need energy and they need food. And this sort of lays the context for how we've gone about studying this in the estuary. So these bacteria need organic matter to produce cell material and CO2, and they also need sulfate to get energy. But as a byproduct of that, they also produce methylmercury. So sulfates and organic matter, because they're sort of on the left side of this equation, they're the ones that are driving these processes. If there's a lot more sulfate, then maybe this will happen faster. If there's a lot more organic matter, maybe this will happen